Joining me now to discuss, Guy Benson, townhall.com political editor, a Fox Business contributor. Guy, when you hear her say what Kamala Harris, the vice president, said to Lester Holt and then earlier, it's the laugh. Like, what is your reaction when you hear her say that?
Well, hey, Dagan, I think the laugh is this strange, nervous tick that she has when she's dealing with an issue that might be thorny and she may not feel like she's on completely solid ground. And the answer, she bursts into laughter, and it's pretty awkward. And I think it sort of sends maybe the wrong message to a lot of people who are watching any given exchange. And that exchange with Lester Holt was pretty interesting because she used sort of the royal we. We've been to the border. We've been to the border. It's true she was there as a candidate, as a senator, when she was showboating and preening and professing to care about the crisis and the kids in cages and all of that. But as a member of an administration, second in command, who's actually now presiding over this crisis that they have made worse, she hasn't gone down there, and she keeps avoiding the question of whether or not she's going to go. And the Europe deflection, maybe she thought that was an example of being quick on your feet. I'm not sure that answer did what she hoped it would do. That royal we is something that race car drivers use when they wreck the car, and they use the we to lay the blame on their crew members. That's what they do. But she has been made the point person of this disaster. And Guy, it begs the question of, like, how does this affect her potentially running for president? Because it looks like somebody in the White House is setting her up. Well, I don't think that she's a terribly politically talented person to begin with. I've said that for a very long time. There's a reason she couldn't even make it to Iowa in the Democratic primaries. She steps in it a lot. And I think this was another example where her instincts and her ability to give answers and be nimble, it's not top flight, at least in my view, and this was another example of it. As for the substance of the policy, I think what's frustrating, Dagan, to a lot of people, and what's baffling to me, is her argument is, well, I don't have to go to the U.S. southern border to see this crisis, and it's obvious what caused the crisis. In fact, leaders in El Salvador and Guatemala have said it's the incentives, the rhetoric, the policies of the Biden administration. But they say, oh, no, the vice president's down here because we're going to address the root causes. We heard that from Brian Yennis in his report. The root causes of what sends people out of Guatemala up toward the U.S. and toward our border. Even if you felt like that was realistic, for the U.S. to go in over a long period of time and change the situation on the ground in any number of countries. We know people are coming from many different countries, not just these 3 or 4 that they're focusing on. To me, that's a very long-term project. It might be quixotic. It would take a huge amount of money. You're not going to get it done quickly, at the very least. Like, to put it as optimistically as possible, what the government and the administration and the executive branch does have immediate control over, if they want to, is the sovereign U.S. border and fixing the problem there where she won't even show up.
So you're really full of yourself if you go down to other countries, which is essentially what the vice president is doing, and say, you need to manage your border, but we're not going to manage ours. We have completely turned our back on immigration law in the United States, but you countries need to take care of this problem for us. Maybe that's why she said, don't come, because you had an interview from the president of Guatemala who said that he and the vice president were not on the same side of the coin, that they had asked the U.S. government to send more of a clear message to prevent more people from leaving. So this trip just seemed like, at least at the outset, that it was just designed to make it look like Biden and company and Harris were doing something about a problem they have no intention of fixing because they want open borders into the U.S.
Yeah, they're not going to fix Guatemala. They're not going to change dramatically anytime soon the circumstances on the ground that might lead some people to head north. But as I said, the president of Guatemala said, when the U.S. says we're going to reunite families, we're going to allow children in, the next day, this was his quote, the next day, coyotes and smugglers mobilized to start moving kids and families up toward the border. Those are the true incentives. The Biden administration has created those incentives, and now they're trying to sort of backpedal a little bit and have a soundbite of the vice president saying, don't come, we're going to enforce the border. Their actions and a lot of their other rhetoric tells another story. But even one clip of Harris saying, don't come, if you're going to emigrate illegally, we're going to turn you back at the border, even that has rankled the likes of AOC, who's been expressing her disappointment in the vice president, saying we shouldn't be sending this message to communities outside of our country. So there's going to be some internecine fighting within the Democratic Party, because some of them are just open borders blatantly, and they're going to try to claim to voters, no, we're not, we're going to get this under control, when there's a large, very influential element of their base and of their party that thinks even what the administration is currently doing is too draconian, which is not going to fly with most voters.
Yeah, just saying don't come it is too draconian for people on the far left, because this is an influx of future voters, essentially. But Guy, how bad does it have to get at the border? Because what bothers me and so many other people about the nervous laughter from the vice president is this administration, Biden and company and Harris, they've created a foundation that allows people to profit from human misery and suffering. I've said that all along, whether it's drug trafficking or human trafficking, and she's laughing about it.
For the third consecutive month in May, Dagan, according to Axios, a new report, there were more than 170,000 detained illegal immigrants at the U.S. southern border, 170,000 or more in March, and again in April, and again in May. We're on track for more than 1.3 million just in 1 year, which is an extraordinary number. And in addition to that, part of the problem, Dagan, is those are the people that we know of who were actually detained. The estimate in April was of the 170,000 plus who were captured, there were at least 40,000 known gotaways, people who crossed the border illegally, didn't want to get detained, and were able to escape into our territory, into our country, and who are presumably still here. And the administration's really weakening deportation protocols right now. If that repeated itself, which would logically be the case based on similar stats in May, I mean, we're probably at more than 100,000 gotaways, not detained illegal immigrants, over the last 3 months alone. And even if the vast majority of those people are otherwise law-abiding or, hardworking people who are just trying to improve their lives, they, A, don't have a right to be here if they come in illegally, and B, if there's a fraction of them that aren't cartel members, traffickers, terrorists, people who want to commit crimes or do us harm, how many of those people are acceptable in the eyes of the Biden administration,
right,
which keeps telling us the border is secure? I mean, the numbers I just rehearsed totally belie that ludicrous claim.
It's wide open, and I'll end with this, Guy. Kamala Harris laughed about not having been to Europe. She'll wind up at the southern border when it looks more like the south of France. That's my prediction. Guy Benson, thank you so much. Great to see you, my friend.
Thanks, Dagan.